He froze. Cameras caught it. Lindsey Graham's face went pale the moment Pam Bondi entered the room, carrying a folder that could destroy his career. Leaked Ukraine documents, secret wire transfers, and then someone was handcuffed. This isn't just a political scandal. It's a full-blown panic at the highest level of power. And you're about to see exactly why it all started in a tightly guarded hearing room on Capitol Hill. The Senate Intelligence Committee had gathered for what was supposed to be a routine closed-door session. Senators shuffled papers, staffers typed away on laptops, and security stood quietly at every corner. But what happened next changed everything. Without warning, the doors swung open. In walked Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General and a well-known figure in conservative legal circles. The room fell silent. No one had her on the list. She wasn't scheduled to testify, but she wasn't empty-handed. Clutched tightly in her hand was a large sealed manila envelope, thick with documents she claimed would blow the lid off a hidden international scandal. As she took her seat, whispers buzzed through the chamber like electricity. What is she doing here? Who let her in? What's in that folder? But those whispers stopped the moment Senator Lindsey Graham turned his head and saw her. His face dropped, completely pale, like someone had just read him his last rites. At first, Graham tried to play it cool. He adjusted his tie, looked down at his phone, and pretended not to notice her. But those watching closely said it was impossible to ignore the way he shifted uncomfortably in his chair, the sudden tapping of his fingers, the glance toward the exit door. Pam Bondi, stone-faced and calm, asked for the committee's attention. Then she placed the envelope on the desk and made a statement that hit like a thunderclap. These are leaked documents from Ukrainian officials, obtained lawfully through a global transparency watchdog. They include wire transfers, personal communications, and internal memos, several of which directly name sitting U.S. officials, including, unfortunately, Senator Lindsey Graham. Boom. That sentence alone was enough to suck the air out of the room. Senators sat frozen. Some gasped. Others leaned forward, unsure whether they were watching a political stunt or a live political execution. The staffers' fingers stopped typing. Phones started vibrating as words spread like wildfire beyond those four walls. Pam Bondi had just accused one of the most senior Republican senators of being involved in covert dealings in Ukraine. To those unfamiliar, Graham has been a central player in U.S. foreign policy for years. A longtime member of the Armed Services Committee and close ally of key defense contractors, he has always had his hands in foreign aid and military strategy. But until now, no one had dared suggest those dealings might have crossed a legal or ethical line. Bondi didn't stop there. She motioned to a large screen behind her and displayed a slide, an excerpt from an internal Ukrainian memo, dated 2015, referencing U.S. liaison G, with an annotation that included a U.S. Senate seal and a partially redacted name that appeared to end in Ram. A sharp inhale spread across the room. Bondi continued, "We also found mention of previously undisclosed meetings between U.S. officials and private Ukrainian financiers during a key moment in the war effort. These meetings weren't recorded in the official Senate travel logs, nor were they disclosed publicly." Now, everyone was on edge. Lindsey Graham finally spoke, but not to deny, not at first. Instead, he asked, voice trembling just slightly, "Madam Chair, I'd like to request a recess." The committee chair, stunned but composed, refused. "We will hear Ms. Bondi's full statement before any motions are considered," she replied. What happened next sent media rooms into overdrive. Bondi handed over copies of the documents to the committee clerk. Within minutes, someone inside leaked images to reporters. Screenshots of bank transfer records, emails between foreign diplomats, and even a signed letter by an unnamed U.S. official advising a Ukrainian firm to maintain discretion until Senate support is secured. By now, reporters were assembling outside the hearing room. Capitol security began restricting hallway access. Cable news cut to breaking banners. Lindsey Graham's name was trending nationwide, alongside Ukraine leaks and Pam Bondi. Inside the room, Graham was seen whispering urgently to one of his staffers. Some said his voice cracked. Others claimed he was texting someone nonstop, perhaps trying to coordinate an emergency response. Meanwhile, Pam Bondi wasn't backing down. She concluded her remarks with this: "The American people deserve answers. These documents raise serious questions about transparency, influence, and accountability. This is not about politics. It's about the truth." Boom! Another thunderbolt. But then, just when the room thought it couldn't get more dramatic, a Capitol Police officer entered the chamber and whispered something to the committee chair. A moment later, a young man, later confirmed to be a Senate staffer, was escorted out in handcuffs. The connection? He was reportedly caught trying to delete files from a secure Senate drive minutes after the Bondi documents were revealed. Now, it wasn't just a scandal. It was a potential cover-up. And Lindsey Graham? He looked like a man cornered. He didn't speak again for the rest of the session. In less than an hour, Pam Bondi had done what few thought possible: put one of the most powerful names in Washington on defense, with the entire country watching and asking the same question: what was Lindsey Graham really doing in Ukraine, and why did it take leaked documents to find out? What began with a sealed envelope and a suspicious glance from Senator Lindsey Graham has turned into a political earthquake. As Pam Bondi continues to release batch after batch of explosive documents, one thing is now crystal clear: the scandal is far from over, and it's only getting bigger. In Washington, scandals usually follow a script. There's an allegation, a few days of outrage, then a carefully worded denial followed by months of slow-moving investigations that rarely go anywhere. But not this time. Pam Bondi shattered that model by going straight to the public, with receipts, records, and relentless resolve. And now, thanks to the wave of verified leaks and mounting pressure from voters, real consequences are beginning to unfold in ways nobody predicted. Multiple investigations launched. First, the Senate Ethics Committee quietly opened a preliminary inquiry, not just into Lindsey Graham, but also into two other senators whose names appeared in Bondi's second data release. While those names haven't yet been officially confirmed, leaks suggest at least one is a Democrat with ties to foreign energy lobbyists, and the other a senior member of the Armed Services Committee. Bondi wasn't bluffing when she said this crossed party lines. Meanwhile, over at the Department of Justice, sources confirmed that a special team within the Public Integrity Section had begun reviewing the leaked materials for possible criminal conduct, including violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, money laundering, and conspiracy to defraud the U.S. government. This is no longer just a PR nightmare. It's a legal one. According to one former federal prosecutor who spoke to reporters, this is the kind of evidence we rarely see made public. Direct trails between foreign funding and American influence. If this continues to hold up under scrutiny, you're looking at indictments. Graham's political collapse. Lindsey Graham's political standing, once rock solid, is now in free fall. Polls taken just a week after Bondi's first release showed his approval among Republican voters in South Carolina had dropped by 31%. Even more troubling, half of his own donors have reportedly paused contributions. Several political action committees aligned with him have gone quiet, withholding ad buys and endorsements. Some Republican strategists are openly discussing whether Graham should step down from his committee roles, or worse, not seek re-election at all. His once reliable allies? Silent. His party leadership? Avoiding comment. Even conservative media figures who once championed Graham's foreign policy credentials are now saying it's time for new leadership. It's political exile in real time. And while Graham has continued to deny wrongdoing, his responses are growing increasingly defensive and less convincing by the day. In a recent interview, he even suggested Pam Bondi should be investigated herself for releasing classified material, a claim legal experts quickly debunked, noting that none of the files released were marked classified, and many had already been submitted to international watchdog groups. Bondi's response? Senator Graham should be more concerned with answering for what's in the documents than trying to silence the people releasing them. Bondi's rise and what's coming next. While Graham scrambles, Pam Bondi's influence has surged. Her credibility, once dismissed by legacy media outlets, is now undeniable. Journalists from across the political spectrum are acknowledging that her evidence has been verified through multiple sources, and her approach, methodical, factual, and unflinching, has made it impossible to dismiss her as simply partisan. She's not just a whistleblower. She's becoming something more powerful, a symbol of reckoning in a city that rarely sees it. And she's not slowing down. At the end of her most recent press conference, Bondi teased what she called the third file drop, scheduled to go public within the next 10 days. This next release will reveal names, plural. It will show how foreign lobbying corrupted critical votes in Congress. And yes, it will include internal communications from sitting members of the House and Senate. Those words were seismic. For the first time in years, multiple congressional offices are preparing for damage control, not just because of political attacks, but because of receipts. Staffers are lawyered up. PR teams are on red alert. Internal emails are being scrubbed, and cybersecurity firms are quietly being brought into audit communications, all out of fear of what Bondi will reveal next. The tension is no longer behind the scenes. It's visible daily in the halls of Congress. What's at stake for America? But this story isn't just about Graham, or even Bondi. It's about something bigger, the trust between Americans and the people they elect. For too long, foreign influence in Washington has operated under the surface, deals made in private, money flowing in shadows, votes being cast that serve donors, not citizens. Pam Bondi ripped that curtain open. Now, the public is watching, demanding answers, and for the first time in a long time, there may actually be consequences. Congressional oversight committees are facing pressure from constituents like never before. Town halls are packed. Voters are asking questions about PACs, lobbying disclosures, and foreign ties, things most people never paid attention to before. In a recent town hall in South Carolina, one voter confronted a Graham ally with this line: "If Bondi's documents are fake, prove it. If they're real, resign." That kind of clarity is rare in politics, but it may be exactly what this moment demands. The final word, for now. So where does this story go next? That depends on how deep the corruption runs, and how far Pam Bondi is willing to go to expose it. One thing is certain: this isn't ending with headlines. It's not fading from the news cycle, and it won't be swept under the rug. With more names to be revealed, investigations underway, and a nation watching closely, the real question isn't what happens to Lindsey Graham? It's who's next? And when that third file drops, we'll all have our answer. In Washington, D.C., reputations are built over decades and sometimes destroyed in days. But Pam Bondi wasn't waiting decades to make her mark. Within 72 hours of revealing the leaked Ukraine documents, she had done something few outsiders ever managed to do: turn the entire city on its head. And she did it with facts, fearlessness, and fire. Long known as a former Florida Attorney General and fierce Trump ally, Bondi was a stranger to high-profile battles. But this wasn't a legal campaign or a courtroom drama. This was a full-scale political takedown, and Bondi was executing it with sniper precision. At her second press conference, held not behind closed doors, but on the steps of the Capitol, surrounded by cameras and reporters, Bondi stood firm, sharp-dressed, and laser-focused. Her calm tone contrasted with the explosive nature of what she was about to unveil. She began, "Let's be clear, this isn't just about one senator. This is about a system that for years has operated in the shadows, where influence is bought, foreign dollars flow freely, and accountability is optional. That ends now." Then came round two of the leaks. Bondi displayed a new set of documents, internal memos from a Ukrainian-based lobby firm, dated between 2015 and 2018. In them were detailed notes describing meetings with high-value American contacts, listed by code names. But now, Bondi revealed the decoding key. Code name LG1, Lindsey Graham. Code name JW3, believed to be a senior committee staffer on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Code name NSC2, a former National Security Council aide. The documents didn't just list meetings. They described deliverables. One entry read, LG1 advocate for defense funding package in exchange for third-party investment commitment. Ensure low media exposure. Another entry described a closed-door dinner with 3 U.S. committee members and noted that priority funds will be rerouted to compliant PACs. The press erupted. This wasn't speculation anymore. This was coordination. But what stunned observers the most wasn't the documents themselves. It was Bondi's control over the narrative. She didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't act like a politician. She acted like a prosecutor who had her case ready and her evidence locked down. We verified this information through multiple independent sources, including forensic accountants and international transparency agencies. This isn't political. It's criminal, she stated, eyes locked on the camera. Public response was immediate. Cable news lit up. Online viewership of the press conference skyrocketed into the millions. Even media outlets that typically dismiss Bondi as partisan began acknowledging the legitimacy of her findings. A prominent investigative journalist from a center-left publication tweeted, "I've reviewed the second batch of Bondi's docs. They're real, verified through 3 different intel contacts. If true, this could be one of the biggest foreign influence scandals since the Cold War." Meanwhile, pressure was mounting inside both political parties. Republicans were divided. Some GOP figures defended Graham, saying he was being targeted for his foreign policy work. But many were eerily silent, especially after Bondi began hinting that more Republican names would appear in her third data release. A senior conservative strategist was caught off record saying, "It's like a political grenade just rolled into the Senate, and Pam Bondi pulled the pin." Others within the party feared primary chaos, as challengers in several states began using Bondi's revelations as fuel for campaign ads. In Graham's home state of South Carolina, local GOP leaders were reportedly in full-blown panic mode. Democrats were cautiously celebrating. On the other side of the aisle, Democrats couldn't hide their satisfaction, but even they weren't safe. Bondi was clear. This wasn't a one-party story. At the press conference, she made that perfectly clear. If you think this is just a Republican issue, think again. Our next release will name officials from both parties, because corruption doesn't care about your party registration. It only cares about power. That one quote set the internet on fire. #BondiStorm began trending worldwide. Commentators from all political stripes were calling this the most disruptive outside investigation D.C. had seen in decades. And while the political establishment scrambled, Bondi's strategy was becoming clearer. Drip the evidence. Don't dump it all at once. Keep the media cycle running. Stay legally airtight. Every document vetted. Every claim backed by independent audits. Stay above the noise. Avoid partisan rants and focus on facts. It was working. While Graham flailed in interviews and his allies ducked cameras, Bondi was winning over public opinion. Polls taken just days after the second leak showed over 68% of Americans wanted a formal Senate inquiry into foreign money influence. Even 54% of Republican voters said they wanted the Senate to fully examine the Bondi documents. She was shifting the culture. For years, politicians had operated under the assumption that as long as you had party loyalty and enough media coverage, scandals could be managed, spun, or buried. Pam Bondi shattered that illusion. And, perhaps most dangerously for those in power, she had momentum. Not only was she releasing documents, but her team had also begun launching a digital evidence portal, where verified files would be made available to journalists, watchdog groups, and even ordinary citizens. No more gatekeeping. No more selective leaks. Bondi was letting the people see for themselves. We're not asking you to believe us. We're showing you the truth. Follow the money. Follow the documents. It's all there, she said. As Washington insiders whispered in fear, and as staffers in multiple Senate offices began consulting lawyers, one thing became unshakably clear. Pam Bondi wasn't just exposing corruption. She was becoming the most feared name in D.C. And she wasn't done. She closed the press conference with just one sentence, a promise and a warning. Next week, you'll see just how deep this goes. The political world was still catching its breath from Pam Bondi's document bombshell when Senator Lindsey Graham finally broke his silence. And let's just say it wasn't the composed, confident response many expected from a seasoned lawmaker. Instead, what followed was one of the most chaotic, emotional, and revealing interviews of Graham's entire career. Just 24 hours after Bondi exposed the leaked Ukraine documents to the Senate Intelligence Committee, Graham appeared on a primetime political talk show. His voice was tense, his body language rigid, and his answers, at times, bordered on frantic. The first words out of his mouth set the tone for the entire interview. This is nothing more than a hit job, a well-timed, politically motivated hit job by people who want to destroy my reputation. But it didn't stop there. Graham accused Pam Bondi directly, calling her actions reckless and accusing her of working with foreign propagandists to smear American officials. He claimed the documents were unverified, doctored, and part of a coordinated campaign to silence conservative voices. But here's the problem. He didn't deny what was in them. When asked point-blank whether he had ever done business with Ukrainian entities or profited from energy or defense contracts tied to foreign interests, Graham responded not with a yes or no, but with deflection. Look, I've been working for years to support Ukraine's sovereignty. I've been to Kiev. I've met with President Zelensky. That's no secret. But this idea that I'm some sort of backroom arms dealer? It's absurd. That response didn't help his case, especially since Pam Bondi, just hours before, had released a follow-up video online showing a direct link between one of the Ukrainian companies named in the documents and a political PAC that supported Graham's 2016 re-election campaign. The transaction wasn't legal per se, but the optics were terrible. In her post, Bondi calmly but firmly stated, "Senator Graham may deny, distract, and deflect, but the money doesn't lie. We now have tax filings, bank records, and internal communications showing clear connections. He can call it a hit job. I call it accountability." That video racked up over 5 million views in just 8 hours. Graham, meanwhile, was unraveling on live TV. In another tense moment during the interview, the host pressed him again on whether he would support an independent investigation into the matter. Graham's answer raised even more eyebrows. "I think we need to be careful not to weaponize investigations against political opponents. We've seen this play out with Trump. With Kavanaugh, it's just the latest playbook." That line set off a firestorm. Critics pounced, accusing Graham of hiding behind partisan talking points instead of addressing the serious allegations in front of him. Even some Republican commentators admitted his tone was more panicked than persuasive. And then came the incident inside the Capitol, one that made headlines around the country. While speaking privately with members of his team, Graham was reportedly overheard shouting behind closed doors. According to a congressional aide who spoke to a reporter anonymously, he kept repeating that this was a setup, that he was being stabbed in the back by people on his own side. He was furious, like full-on meltdown. He was yelling, "I stood by Trump. I fought for this party, and this is how I get treated." If true, that quote revealed two things. Graham knew the scandal had staying power. He suspected people within his own party were turning on him, and that may not have been paranoia, because behind the scenes, Republican leaders were already distancing themselves. According to insiders, several top GOP senators began privately advising Graham to lay low, cancel media appearances, and begin preparing a long-term strategy. But the chaos didn't stop there. Capitol Hill police confirmed they had detained a Senate staffer connected to a data breach incident tied to Bondi's leaked files. Though the individual was later released without charges, rumors swirled that he had attempted to access or wipe internal server logs shortly after the Bondi revelations. Some reporters began calling it the Ukraine leak panic, and as pressure mounted, Graham's attempt to control backfired again. He issued a formal statement through his office the next day, calling Bondi's actions unethical and demanding a congressional ethics probe into her. That move sparked even more backlash, as legal experts quickly pointed out that Bondi was not a senator, not a government employee, and was acting as a private citizen working with a legal watchdog group. In other words, Graham had no jurisdiction over her. On social media, the response was brutal. #GrahamMeltdown began trending. Some called it the beginning of the end for one of the Senate's most powerful figures. Meanwhile, Bondi responded with a cold, calculated jab on X, formerly Twitter. When they can't deny the evidence, they attack the messenger. Classic DC panic. That single tweet got over 600,000 likes in under 2 hours. Back in DC, staffers described the atmosphere in Graham's office as tense and paranoid. Reporters noted a significant increase in private security around his Capitol Hill office. Even some of his usual allies, including a few conservative think tanks, declined to issue public statements in his defense. He was, as one insider put it, politically radioactive. And yet, Bondi wasn't finished. She scheduled another briefing for following week, teasing more names, more evidence, and what she called a direct link between foreign lobbying money and a major U.S. committee vote. As the scandal widened, Graham found himself isolated, not just by his enemies, but by his own team. Some staffers reportedly began consulting attorneys. Others quietly started looking for new jobs. This wasn't just a PR nightmare. This was the beginning of a career in collapse. And as the next round of leaks loomed, one thing was clear. Pam Bondi wasn't going away. And Lindsey Graham's worst day might still be ahead. The envelope Pam Bondi dropped on the desk wasn't just dramatic. It was devastating. Inside it, according to Bondi, were the kind of documents that don't just raise eyebrows. They trigger full-scale investigations. The heart of the scandal? A series of payments made from Ukrainian energy and defense companies to shell organizations operating inside U.S. financial systems. The timeline? Between 2014 and 2016, during the most volatile years of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. But here's where things took a darker turn. These shell companies were reportedly linked to American officials, and Lindsey Graham's name came up again and again. Bondi explained that the financial trail was discovered after an international corruption probe in Kiev resulted in the seizure of a private email server, one allegedly used by a Ukrainian financier connected to Western lobbying operations. On that server, investigators uncovered spreadsheets, invoices, contracts, and bank statements that detailed a series of consulting payments and defense advisory fees. The total? Over $12.4 million. Now, what raised red flags was the destination of those payments. Some led to defunct LLCs based in Delaware and New York, companies that seemed to exist only on paper. One LLC in particular showed recurring deposits from a Ukrainian defense manufacturer and monthly withdrawals tied to a D.C.-based investment group, which had Senator Graham listed as a former advisor. That was the smoking gun Bondi waved in front of the Senate committee. We're not just talking about a vague mention. We have names, account numbers, timestamps, and even calendar invites for Zoom calls involving U.S. political consultants and Ukrainian officials. These weren't small-time side deals. These were structured operations designed to move money under the radar. Bondi also presented an internal email, reportedly from a European banking watchdog, warning a Ukrainian company to minimize future transfers to U.S. firm GCP Holdings due to increased scrutiny on American political donors. That same firm, GCP Holdings, was listed as a campaign donor on one of Lindsey Graham's previous finance reports. Coincidence? Bondi didn't think so. The names might be coded, the money might be masked, but follow the paper, and it all leads back to the same places, she said confidently. Now, let's break this down for the viewers. This wasn't just about money. It was about influence. Graham had long been known as a hawk on foreign policy, particularly on matters involving Ukraine. He publicly supported increased aid to Ukraine, made repeated trips to Kiev, and even authored legislation to fast-track military assistance. On the surface, that looked like strong foreign policy. But now, with these documents emerging, people were starting to ask, was it patriotism or was it profit? Worse still, Bondi pointed to handwritten meeting notes from a Ukrainian lobbying firm. These notes, scribbled in a mix of English and Ukrainian, mention a Senator Lindsey agreeing to keep channels open with defense investors if strategic alignment was maintained. Strategic alignment, defense investors, backroom meetings. Things were unraveling fast. Meanwhile, the media got hold of more screenshots, including images of wire transfer receipts to U.S. bank accounts traced to consulting work. But when reporters reached out to those supposed consultants, some said they'd never even heard of the Ukrainian companies paying them. One man said, "I don't know anything about Ukraine. I was told to set up an LLC and just let the lawyers handle the rest. I thought it was legal tax work." Legal or not, it was looking shadier by the second. And Graham? He was nowhere to be found. After his dramatic reaction in the hearing room, the senator had gone completely silent. No press conferences, no tweets, no statements. Just silence. That only fueled speculation. Rumors swirled that his legal team was conducting an internal audit, fearing that the payments might violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act FAR, or worse, trigger a full federal investigation. Former DOJ officials weighed in on cable news, saying the evidence, if legitimate, could open the door to bribery, money laundering, and failure to disclose foreign ties, all serious offenses. But Pam Bondi wasn't done. She ended her press briefing that day with a cryptic message. What we've shared today is just the beginning. We are currently working with international transparency partners to verify more communications, more transfers, and yes, more names. The implication? Graham wasn't alone. Bondi hinted that other U.S. senators and State Department officials might also be named in future document releases. She claimed this wasn't about party lines, either. In her words, if Democrats think they're safe, they should think again. Corruption isn't red or blue. It's just corrupt. That line went viral. And while the internet exploded with memes and commentary, one question haunted Washington. How long had this been going on, and how far would Bondi go to bring it all to light? Inside conservative circles, some were panicking. Graham's allies urged him to speak publicly. Others whispered that the party should quietly distance itself from him until the storm passed. But Bondi had flipped the script. She didn't need mainstream media. She didn't wait for special prosecutors. She brought the evidence straight to the people, knowing the outrage would do the rest. This wasn't just a document drop. It was a targeted strike. And with the documents now in the hands of Senate investigators and independent journalists, there was no turning back.